For years, the Parker BS family was considered untouchable. They'd been all over the place. Weddings, holidays, private estates, royal occasions where common folks are never invited. They had become part of the furniture, knitted into the fabric of royal life so thoroughly that no one questioned their place. Then something happened at Sandringham, a little something, a thing that almost no one observed, and that little moment probably affected everything. This is what people say happened. Princess Anne was engaged in a private meeting. A meeting out of sight, out of mind, out of the camera's eye, out of the reporter's line of sight. The talk was about what's next, what the monarchy will look like in years to come, who is at the center, who is moving slowly to the edges. Those who say they know what happened say somebody handed Princess Anne details about the various members of the Parker BS family. She examined it closely. She allowed herself time. She wasn't rushed or speedy talking. She simply sat reading, contemplating, weighing everything in her thoughts. She nodded then, just a wee bow, nothing dramatic. There was no speech, not a big announcement. No formal document was signed. A subtle, placid nod, hardly noticeable. But the wink, according to those same insiders, seemed to change the game. For before long, 5 names related with the Parker BS family were missing from some very essential lists and arrangements. Here's the deal on that nod now. No one can prove it happened. No video, no recording exists, but there has been no formal confirmation from anyone inside the palace. The whole affair turns on something that cannot be proved. This makes the whole thing fascinating, for if the nod never truly existed, the changes individuals say resulted from it are still worth looking at. To properly comprehend this, we have to go back decades, long before anyone was talking about gestures or lists or subtle shifts of power. Princess Anne had a short-lived relationship with Andrew Parker Bowles in the early 1970s. It wasn't some big controversy. It was just a young royal hanging out with someone from the same affluent circles she frequented. The relationship did not work out. Camilla didn't become a key player in Charles's life for a long time, but it gave Anne something valuable. She got first-hand experience with the Parker BS family while they were not officially attached to the throne. She saw them with her own eyes, not via the headlines or the later regal narratives. She observed the connections evolve and shift inside that realm. She saw the dynamics early on. That history counts, as it implies Princess Anne's view of this family is not from briefing papers or second-hand information. She knows them for actual decades. She saw them before they were captured into the orbit of the court. She saw their assimilation develop over time, and that offers her a unique perspective point that nearly no one else has. Jump ahead to 2005. Camilla married King Carlos. The Parker BS clan didn't just come to the wedding and go home. They were there, constant figures in regal spaces. Camilla's sister Annabelle Elliott got involved with design and remodeling work on Duchy of Cornwall homes. Tom Parker BS became a fixture at royal occasions and private family parties. Laura Lopez entered into family settings and had access that in time became usual and expected. Andrew Parker BS stayed in touch via decades of social connections. For nearly 20 years, this arrangement was normalized. No press releases were issued to publicize it. There was no big news. It just became part of the background beat of the royal existence. What could have seemed strange at first was integrated until it seemed perfectly natural. Queen Elizabeth then died in 2022, and everything that had been humming along silently got re-examined. Her death was the end of an era in more than one sense, and King Charles was king. Prince William gained sovereignty of the Duchy of Cornwall, and the responsibility for royal life began to pass to a younger generation in a way that was no longer theoretical. These were actual decisions now, actual power, genuine change. The change of leadership has opened the door to a deeper internal evaluation of long-standing arrangements, royal observers said. This is not for public review, not announced with speeches and official confirmation. Behind the walls of the palace, a silent process began, people questioning fundamental questions. Which relationships are intimately connected to King Charles? Which ones are more strongly associated with the institution itself? Which of the long-standing partnerships would naturally continue under the leadership of Prince William? And which ones might gradually lose ground as the monarchy moves forward? There was no mention of rejection or punishment. They described it as realistic preparation for what was to come, a means to help the monarchy evolve in an organic fashion, unencumbered by previous structures that may not make sense in a new era. This is where the stated differences between Charles and William become crucial to comprehend. Several insiders have described their leadership approaches in blunt terms. Charles leads via the heart. William is the mastermind. That difference continues popping up over and over again. Charles has always prized extended partnerships, personal loyalty, and stability. His style has been formed by decades of relationship. William is more and more recognized as a man with a more modern and concentrated approach. He doesn't necessarily feel bound to preserve every historical connection. He seems to desire a smaller, more efficient, more clearly defined monarchy, one that is easier to administer, easier to explain to the public, and more in line with modern standards. One insider told a journalist, "He's not going to be overly cautious or worry about being popular. It will be strong, it will be clear, and it will be ready to make hard choices when it must." Other stories have painted him as a harsh leader who is not readily swayed by feeling if he believes a choice is essential. Someone who has a good memory for situations, yet does not readily forget bad or disruptive actions. So this is the background now, the start of a new era, internal review going on quietly. A future monarch apparently thinks in terms of strategy and not sentiment, and a family embroiled in royal life for 2 decades. That's the context in which this alleged encounter at Sandringham is said to have taken place. Palace officials said it was a confidential and delicate discussion not in public view and beyond typical royal decision-making channels. The talks were on the future shape of the monarchy and how old relationships might be part of its next phase. During these meetings, Princess Anne was reportedly given details involving a number of members of the Parker BS family. Exact details have not been made public, but sources say it was part of wider internal talks on jobs, access, and how the royal household might look in the future. And this is where the story takes that near-mythic turn. At one point in the encounter, accounts say Princess Anne hesitated, not a rapid or offhand answer, quiet moment of contemplation. She studied closely what lay before her, pausing to think about the burden of royal history and where the monarchy may be headed. After this little pause she gave, it is said, a modest, quiet, silent nod. There was no speech, no public comment, no written confirmation, nothing that would ordinarily signify an official royal decision. But although the event was quiet, insiders later acknowledged it was surprisingly significant. They took it as symbolic. It was like a silent hint that some course had already been decided behind closed doors, even if nothing had been announced. Now, if you are thinking a nod is not a decision, you are correct. A nod at a secret meeting that no one can prove happened is not proof of anything. But that's not the interesting part, not whether the nod really did happen the way it's depicted. And the fun part was what it supposedly was followed by. And following this meeting, onlookers began to see small but consistent changes affecting various members of the Parker BS family. They were not released to the public. No official comments were made, but they came slowly, as little changes that became more apparent with time. Annabel Elliot, who had been involved in design and renovation work connected with Duchy of Cornwall residences for many years, is said to have seen her role start to diminish after William started to take a more active role in the duchy. Her name became less evident in public-facing records, and her previously consistent link to those projects seemed to lessen. Tom Parker BS, often seen at royal gatherings and private family occasions over many years, is said to have experienced a change in the number of invites, which were once regular and predictable, but started to feel less frequent. In some instances, events which had before involved him in the wider family circle seemed to take place without his presence. Andrew Parker BS, whose links go back decades, also seemed to play a quieter role in emerging royal circles as the next generation emerged to the fore. It seemed his profile was shrinking within that changing structure. Laura Lopez was also said to be affected. She was still a welcome guest at family gatherings, but there were indications that some of the advantages and access points of everyday life were no longer as readily available as they used to be. What had been normal and expected had to be arranged more formally and invited more clearly. That's 4 names, but reports suggest 5 Parker BS identities were removed from a significant list. So who is the 5th and what has gone on there? Here the story takes an interesting turn toward property and long-term planning. For Camilla herself, Ray Millhouse has always been a vital element of her life narrative in Wiltshire. It is generally considered one of the few private dwellings associated with her life before her official accession as Queen Consort. Ray Millhouse has always been a quiet retreat, apart from the pomp and circumstance of the great royal palaces in the ever-present eye of the public, a place connected with family times and personal space from the great load of royal obligations. So when word arose that the property was changing ownership in what appeared to be a private deal, it didn't raise too many red flags. It appeared like a straightforward, routine property deal, the kind that occurs from time to time in wealthy families. But over time, some observers began to look more closely. The deal may have involved more than what was shown in public. People familiar with the subject said. Rather than a straightforward sale or transfer, the framework for future ownership of the land was reported to have been meticulously constructed so that it would remain indirectly connected to members of the Parker BS family. The claims indicate the arrangement may have been designed not only for an immediate transfer but also for longer-term goals. It may be about what is happening now, or it may be about what could happen in the future as preparations are quietly underway behind the scenes. What caught attention was the timing of these purported adjustments. It occurred at a time when many facets of royal life were already thought to be changing discreetly behind the scenes. This has led some commentators to speculate that the property drive might be part of a bigger pattern of preparing for changes in the royal household in the future. Ray Mill House is not just any property. For many, it's a personal connection to Camilla's past, and anything tied to that has more weight than a typical real estate deal. And if the fifth Parker BS name impacted by these movements is tied to that property deal, it starts to appear less like random coincidence and more like a stealthy, coordinated restructure. So let's zoom out and see what we actually have here. Meeting at Sandringham in private. Princess Anne is said to have nodded silently. 5 Parker BS family names witnessing their influence or access change in major ways. Word is that a property of significant personal value to Camilla is changing hands under cautious arrangements. And all this against the backdrop of a changing monarchy with a future king, said to be thinking in strategic and efficiency terms rather than sentiment and long-standing allegiance. The important question is not if Princess Anne's nod actually caused these developments. The question is what these developments tell us about the direction of the monarchy. Princess Anne is hardly a role one thinks of in terms of drama or public controversy. She's generally described as the most grounded, most disciplined member of the royal family. For decades, she has put duty, routine, and service above everything else, carrying out her duties with a regularity that has gained her quiet respect inside and beyond the palace. She rarely wants publicity, rarely conducts interviews, and rarely talks about sensitive family matters. This calm approach has formed her image as someone who would rather act than talk. So when her name is tied to a tale like this, it is important since she is not known for palace drama for no reason. Some observers say her claimed engagement is noteworthy in and of itself. Whether the nod was literal or just her perspective generally carries weight in internal deliberations. She has seen many changes across generations, from the long reign of Queen Elizabeth to the current monarchy of King Charles. She's seen the rise and fall of power and how it can slowly slip away as circumstances change around it. That extended experience, many royal watchers say, gives her a more realistic view of the monarchy than others. Not just because she's a queen, but from decades of observing how ties in the family shift throughout the years. She's seen some connections carefully preserved and those that weaken or dissolve slowly as the monarchy changes. Therefore, her alleged acquiescence or tacit acceptance of certain internal debates has been seen by some as more than just a gesture. It is seen as a potential hint that these shifts are not arbitrary or fleeting, but part of a bigger, more intentional vision for how the monarchy may keep remaking itself. If the nod took place, it may not have been about punishing somebody or settling old scores. It could have been about realizing that the institution is headed in a specific path, and some relationships, no matter how long-standing, may not fit into the next chapter as they did into the last. And that gets us to the big picture. Beyond the names, the meetings, and the alleged private discussions, what does all of this actually tell us about where the monarchy is going? If the power of 5 Parker BS family names has been gradually eroded, then the problem is not people. It speaks to the system itself and how silently it is being remade. It is a story about the changing internal structure of the royal family as one age slips into another. King Charles has frequently held the view that long-standing ties, personal loyalty, and continuity count. His style is the product of decades of connection, of ties held and extended over time, even while circumstances changed. Prince William is increasingly being portrayed as someone who may want a smaller, more efficient, and more clearly defined monarchy. One that is easier to handle, easier to explain to the public, and more in keeping with the expectations of a changing world. In this context, the purported nod by Princess Anne to Sandringham takes on a much deeper meaning. What might have been a basic silent gesture in a private conversation is being construed by certain viewers as something more meaningful. To them, it is not only agreement in a moment, but acceptance of a bigger direction already in motion. In this light, the gesture reads as a subtle acknowledgement that inside the castle a new chapter has already begun. It might not be stated publicly, but it might already be happening slowly through deliberate, piecemeal decisions made behind closed doors, away from the public eye and nearly unnoticeable to the outside world. And so the story naturally leads to greater questions that transcend any one family or person. It explores the nature of power, the process of succession, the meaning of allegiance, and the complex topic of belonging within one of the world's most closely observed institutions. When one generation starts to transmit the baton to the next, who stays at the center and who slowly walks away in quiet while the future is rewritten? It took the Parker B.S. family 20 years to get absorbed into royal life, not through any antagonistic maneuver but by the natural consequence of Camilla's marriage and Charles's fondness for keeping tight relationships maintained. But affection is not always a structural plan, and the institution is now coming into the hands of one who supposedly believes in terms of structure. If William's aim is one of a leaner company, then the slow attrition of access for extended family members makes sense with or without any big meeting or symbolic nod. It doesn't have to have a villain or a victim, just an acknowledgement that the monarchy under William is not likely to operate in the same way as it did under Charles. But the fact Princess Anne is said to be involved in these discussions gives the whole thing a kind of institutional memory. She's the one who's been observing this family since the 70s. She's the one that's witnessed the complete arc. If she's gently indicating approval for a course correction, it's not coming from a petty or dramatic place. This is coming from someone who knows that institutions outlive individuals, and sometimes the most responsible thing you can do is to recognize when a chapter needs to end. Whether explicitly taken from a printed list or just silently had their access decreased over time, these 5 names reflect something bigger than themselves. They are a monarchy in the slow, meticulous, intentional process of choosing what to be next.